You know there's something strange about returning to a world you thought was finished? When the Book of Dust was first announced, it felt like a dream. Philip Pullman was going back to Lyra's Oxford after all those years. It was like finding out someone had discovered an extra chapter of your childhood. I grew up with His Dark Materials. The trilogy wasn't just fantasy, it was this strange, beautiful journey of philosophy that made you feel older and braver than you really were. So when the first book dropped in 2017, the first volume of the Book of Dust, I didn't go in expecting another adventure. I was expecting something that would haunt me. And honestly, I got exactly what I wanted, in the best way possible. I'm Dove James, welcome to this episode. Let's get into it, and let's talk about this wonderful trilogy. So let's talk about the first book, because it's not a sequel, and it's not exactly a prequel either. Pullman called it an equal, meaning it runs alongside His Dark Materials, expanding the world rather than continuing in a straight line. The first book is about Malcolm, an ordinary boy with an extraordinary sense of decency. His journey to protect the baby Lyra during a flood that feels half fairy tale and half biblical. It's quieter, slower, more grounded than Northern Lights, or to my American listeners, Golden Compass ever was. The demons are still there, the magisterium is still watching, but the tone is darker, more adult. Pullman was in his 70s when he wrote this. You can feel that maturity. It's less about rebellion and more about endurance, less about so-called destiny and more about what it means to stay kind and curious in a world that is collapsing around you. And yet, this book still has that spark that made His Dark Materials so amazing in the first place. There's this passage when Malcolm rose down at the flooded world, half dreaming, half terrified. It's pure Pullman, realism and myth merged together into each other. That's the vibe of the Book of the Dust. Wonder, danger, and just quiet melancholy that sits in your chest long after you close the book. Then came the Secret Commonwealth. If the first book was about wonder, this one's very much about disillusionment. This is Lyra as an adult, but not the heroic, shining hero we remember. She's cynical, disconnected from a demon, completely lost in a world that no longer there's no longer the magic that she felt, but politics. It's tired. It's Pullman's most unsettling book because it dares to ask what happens when the chosen one isn't the hero at the end. She is the hero in the original, but what happens when that story ends? What happens after you save the world? There's a deep sadness to that, sort of grown-up grief. Lyra has become someone who no longer believes in what made her extraordinary, and what unfolds hurts. But it's also one of the most human things Pullman has ever written. He's not romanticizing adulthood, he's telling the truth about it. And that's something I love about Pullman. He's never written down to his audience, not as a kid, not as adults. His Dark Materials talked about theology, consciousness, rebellion, and the pure nature of the soul, and did it with talking bears and angels at war. The Book of Dust takes those same ideas, strips away the myth, to show what happens when belief meets reality. I think that's what makes these books so powerful. They're not about nostalgia. They're about what comes after nostalgia. What happens when magic fades, but you still need to find meaning. There's an atmosphere running through both those books. Something dark, foggy, and British in the best way possible. Oxford, but older, stranger, a little haunted. Pullman, the best way to describe the way he writes is that feeling of candlelight on water, of shadows and truth all mixed together. In the Book of Dust, it's even more deliberate. You can almost smell the rain, the river mud, the mildew in the old colleges. It's not just a fantasy building, it's England as myth, memory and warning. What's fascinating is how Pullman used the magisterium now. In His Dark Materials, it was this grand metaphor for authoritarian religion. In the Book of Dust, it's evolved into bureaucracy, propaganda, and control through quiet means. Exactly how corruption looks in the real world. The mirror shifts as we grow up. When we're kids, evil looks obvious. As adults, it's polite, well-dressed, and hard to pin down. And in that way, the Book of Dust feels deeply modern. And Pullman there's always been a nature of politics to his work, but here there's an intimacy to it. It's less about overthrowing the church and more about saving your soul. And now we have book 3. I got it delivered in the mail and I've finished reading it. With the Rosefield, the long-awaited conclusion to the trilogy, and maybe in a way the conclusion to His Dark Materials itself, it's a quieter book, more reflective than grand. Pullman isn't chasing spectacle here, he's searching for peace. For Lyra, this is the end of a long, painful journey, not just across the world, but inwards. She's finally confronted the distance between herself and her demon, the rift that haunted her since the Secret Commonwealth, and more than anything, she's learning how to reconnect faith and reason, skepticism and love. That's what the Rosefield feels like. Reconnecting. Between characters, between ideas, between who we were and who we are and who we will become. It ties together decades of storytelling with a kind of gentle finale. As if Pullman is quietly closing the door on the world he built but leaving the lights on inside. There's a sense of grace to it. Not in the religious sense, but in the human sense. After years of war, confusion and exile, Lyra finds something that resembles peace. Not the naive wonder of childhood, not the blind faith of youth, but that kind of place that only comes where you've questioned everything and survived the answers. With the Rosefields, I think Pullman finally said goodbye to Lyra, to Oxford, maybe even to the younger part of himself who first dreamed of dust. For me, the Book of Dust as a whole isn't about rediscovering magic. It's about accepting change. It's about the slow, painful process of growing up again. About realizing that the stories that shaped you still matter, but in that quiet way. It's about faith, not in God, but in imagination, kindness, and the power of curiosity. I love Pullman's work because it respects the reader. It trusts that you can handle big ideas, and that you'll find your own meaning in them. Whether you've read the Book of Dust as a continuation of His Dark Materials, or as a mirror held up to your adulthood, it's still unmistakably Pullman. Lyrical, brave, deeply human, and maybe that's the real magic. Not dust, not demons, not destiny, but the courage to wonder, even when you know the cost. So if you grew up with the His Dark Materials, I'd love to know how the Book of Dust hit you. Did it feel like coming home, or like saying goodbye all over again? Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. And also Substack memberships and Patreon are available if you're interested. But more importantly, maybe pick up a copy and get lost in the rain, foggy, soaked Oxford all over again. It's still there. It's still waiting. And maybe you can find yourself in those books again.